Hello, my name is Yaya. Thank you for tuning into Trauma and God. I know from personal experience that healing from a black cloud of trauma is possible, but it takes time. Just as in nature, there's always sunlight behind a dark cloud, so it is for us. God is light, and He is always there. We just have to find Him. In this series, I talk about things that hinder us from finding the light and things that we can do that help us overcome obstacles. Today's vlog is choosing a narcissist. In my previous vlog, which is number 13, growing up with a narcissist, I spoke about my childhood situation where there was no choice involved. I was born into a family which for me meant an abusive father and a narcissistic mother. I was finally able to escape when I came of age and married. I finished that vlog with a question. Knowing what I now know as an adult, have I avoided being caught in another narcissistic relationship? The answer is no. So firstly, I want to say again that the word narcissist today is used as a synonym for the word selfish, as in we're describing someone showing selfish behavior. This can be true for all of us, as we're all selfish at times. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the psychological definition of narcissism. Because of the very squirrely and manipulative tactics used by a narcissist to disregard, diminish, and demean a person's thoughts and feelings, I want to tell you how it happened to me. I was in my early 20s. We had 2 little boys, and my husband had recently given up a very lucrative scientific career to go into full-time church ministry. He was one of the speakers at a camp, and we met a young family about our age, with young children the ages of our children. Our friendship was instant and mutual, and even our husbands enjoyed being together. She was creative, I'm creative. We sparked each other to encourage more creativity. How often does this happen? It felt very special, and it felt like it was meant to be. Initially, the wife spent a great deal of time asking me about my life story and listened to me as I did to her story. She also talked about how amazing her children were and her spirituality and her other friends who were also amazing and very spiritual too. I listened, I added to the conversation, I spoke about myself when I needed to. Our tastes were remarkably similar. I chose to marvel at the similarity, and I was very thankful for it. We came from very different backgrounds, so it was quite surprising. Years later, we returned home from a stint abroad, but didn't settle where they lived, despite their desires for us to do so. They were disappointed with us, and I felt very, very guilty. Yet we still visited them a great deal, and my children loved hanging out with theirs. It was just fun. But some things did change. She was still affectionate. She still said how much she loved us, especially me. But slowly, other things began to change. I can't really tell you the exact date of the change because there wasn't one. This change was almost imperceptible. I also can't tell you why she changed. But I can tell you how the changes deeply affected me. For it seemed to me like her changes were directed against my choices, or rather, the choices I thought we had shared in common, where I stayed more conventional in my style of clothes, she became more bohemian in style. Where I stayed more middle of the road in my ideas of churchmanship and Christianity, she became more esoteric and avant-garde, seeing herself as far more contemporary than me. In creating art, her style changed to become more modern, more edgy, not like what she called my boring ideas. Her descriptions of her amazing children increased in length, as did her stories of her amazing friends. Our life and her life remained subjects of her constant comparisons and daily conversation. It ranged from house size to income to the type of vehicle we drove, or to which books I was reading, or the music I listened to. All the comparisons came with a demeaning nuance, and all of them were delivered with a smile or a laugh. I felt diminished, which I believed was her intent, but was very confused by her smiling face. I tried to diminish all the comparisons as just her style of speech. Or maybe I was just being far too sensitive. I need to toughen up. But then she would change her tone and flatter me and charm me and make me feel uplifted and valued and special and loved again. So my emotions swung from low to high, back to low again. In later years, there was less flattery and more criticism. She was always looking for ways to further her own interests and gifts. She knew me well, she knew my weaknesses, and she used them against me. And over time, she ignored my boundaries, my time, my personal space, and my feelings. In our earlier friendship, we used to trade whose home we went to. When we moved far away, they came to visit and would stay for very long periods of time with us. I was pretty sure they would have done just that for us. They would have hosted us for all the weeks that we were there if we had come to see them. So at first I didn't mind. But over time, it seemed that her expectations grew, and she would expect me to be the host, her chauffeur, cook, cleaner, all the while demeaning me to my friends, the very ones I was driving her to visit. Well, this relationship had started 30 years earlier. Then I was young and trying to understand myself and find my place in the world. Towards the end of our 30-year friendship, I had arrived at the point in my life when my childhood amnesia cleared, and I was able to finally see that my father had raped and abused me when I was young. I was spending valuable time in therapy, trying to come to terms with the new impact of this reality. When I started to talk of this new revelation with my friend, she could not believe that this had happened to me. She said that if it had happened, I would have said it right at the beginning of our relationship. She was very angry. She even believed that my counselor had put those ideas into my head. Well, I told my counselor what was going on and explained how confused I'd become by this friend who said that she loved me and then demeaned me to my friends, to myself, to my colleagues. My counselor, who had a PhD from Berkeley and had practiced for many years, suggested I bring my friend with me next time I came, and my friend was happy to come. During this visit, my friend, who had no training as a counselor, vehemently argued with my counselor and declared the things I was saying were simply not true. So the following week, I arrived at my scheduled appointment by myself as planned. My counselor asked, could I not see what was going on? I said, no, please tell me. And she answered, could you not see that her behavior was just like your mother's towards you? At that moment, it was like my eyes were opened and a clarity came over me as my confused memories slotted into orderly place, each memory somehow grouped by similarities. The way I'd been minimized, the way my thoughts were put down, the way my style was put down, the way my feelings were insignificant to her, the way she felt free in my hearing to tell others how dull and boring I was, the way I wasn't esoteric and spiritual enough, the way my children were ignored and minimized, the way she searched for influential people to validate her. Well, when I told my husband, we both felt very stupid for all the years that we'd let my friend do this to me, for all the ways we'd let her speak diminishing words to me. But it had slowly crept on us. We hadn't seen her for who she really was. I also knew that at that moment, we had no choice but to break off this relationship as soon as possible. The evening before their next day's departure arrived. I cooked a meal as usual and we all relaxed. My husband sat quietly by my side and I spoke up. We have had a long relationship together, but what we have is not love, I started to say. You cannot love me and say the unloving things you say to me and about me. The two are mutually exclusive. You need to change. If you change, I will reconsider. But right now, I do not want you to be my friend anymore. Well, she cried. She said she'd always loved me and I was being cruel. How could I break a friendship up after all these years? Her husband was furious with me for hurting his wife. I shed tears too. I was remembering the good that for a long while had been so very good. But then remembered too how it had slowly soured. I remained resolute in my stance. I had rehearsed in my mind how I had never called her names or used disparaging comments. But now I'd drawn a line in the sand and said, absolutely no more unless you change. In confronting her, she deflected, she denied, she became the victim. She saw me as mean and aggressive. She certainly did not understand my point of view. And the aftermath was very painful for all of us, for different reasons. Well, my curt way of cutting her off was due to the fact that I couldn't begin to explain how I felt to her because I was still reeling myself from the confusion she created in me over all the years. The only clarity I now had was to tell her that it had to stop and I was not going to be part of her life anymore until she changed. Well, at that time, I didn't know that narcissists lacked empathy and always believed they are right. Well, herein lies a cautionary tale. If you like me, have grown up with a narcissistic parent, as I did, and have acclimated to their behavior as being normal, beware. You could blindly walk into a relationship with another person with similar traits to your narcissistic parent and be totally unaware of their power plays, just as I was. I've also found other girlfriends who have been caught into a relationship with narcissistic men. It seems that some people who grow up in a loving, sheltered home can be overly naive and trusting. They may fall in love with the first man who showers them with kindness, only to find out too late that this man did so in order to gain their trust. However, any narcissistic tendencies will come out eventually and ruin the marriage. Remember, narcissists are drawn to people who are caring and open and have empathy. These characteristics are ones a narcissist somehow knows they are lacking. So, narcissists initially appear loving and caring and will woo someone with time, gifts, and exhibit great sensitivity to their needs. They learn to echo the other person's likes and dislikes in order to gain their confidence. But it's not who they truly are, and after a while, their charade will crumble, and their true self comes out and takes center stage by diminishing their loved one. Well, I like this description of narcissistic personality disorder, and it bears repetition. It's from helpguide.org, and it says, quote, "They are people in love with an idealized, grandiose image of themselves. They are in love with this inflated self-image precisely because it allows them to avoid deep feelings of insecurity. But propping up their illusions of grandeur takes a lot of work, and that's where the dysfunctional attitudes and behaviors come in. Narcissistic personality disorder involves a pattern of self-centered, arrogant thinking and behavior, a lack of empathy and consideration of other people, in an excessive need for admiration. Others often describe people with NPD as cocky, manipulative, selfish, patronizing, and demanding. This way of thinking surfaces in every area of the narcissist's life, from work and friendships to family and love relationships. People with narcissistic personality disorder are extremely resistant to changing their behavior, even when it's causing them problems. Their tendency is to turn the blame on others. What's more, they're extremely sensitive and react badly to even the slightest criticism, disagreement, or perceived slights, which they view as personal attacks. For the people in the narcissistic's life, it's often easier just to go along with their demands to avoid coldness and rages. However, by understanding more about narcissistic personality disorder, you can spot the narcissists in your life, protect yourself from their power plays, and establish healthy boundaries. It's a long quote, and that's the end of it. Well, I've learned in my response to narcissists, no matter how much I try to fit in to their life and change my own behavior, they seem incapable and unwilling to change theirs. Narcissists feel they have no need to change because they're always right. In fact, they could add physical harm to emotional harm when they see their influence over someone waning and they realize that person is no longer accepting what they project. Be careful. Take good care of yourself. I hope you can learn from my mistakes and spot any narcissists in your life. Protect yourself from their power plays. Establish healthy boundaries. Become healthy yourself. And if you need to, break free of them. Please subscribe and tell others if you found this vlog helpful. You may email me, Yaya, at traumaandgod@gmail.com, or read my personal story, Snakes in the Loo, Damson Books. If this stirs things in you, please reach out and talk to a mental health professional. In the US, help is also available at the following: Suicide and Crisis Helpline, 1-800-273-TALK, which is 8255. Or the Rape, Abuse and Incest National Helpline at 1-800-656-HOPE, which is 4673. God is for you, and so am I. I will see you again next week, next Thursday. Thank you for listening.